Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are at. Hope you have a fantastic day. It's SoulSaint here, and we're coming to the conclusion of our Tour de SoulSaint Dungeon Edition. So, if you guys aren't familiar, we actually have been requested by the community in our ideas channel on the Discord. There's a link below if you guys want to join and see, and maybe even propose your own ideas to our Discord. You can actually be a part of the community. You're more than welcome to join. Be respectful, of course, but enjoy it. And one of the requests that was asked of me was to showcase and demonstrate the reason, the hows and the whys of how I do and developed my teams for my account in terms of approaching dungeon content for the world of Teleria. And we are on the final cusp, the last dungeon on this list that I'm going to be showcasing today, which is Phantom Shogun Grove. This one is one of the more nuanced ones, I would say, in terms of progression. But I heard, and from a feeling standpoint, from what I've dealt with in other dungeons, they've made them very, very easy with the recent nerf that they've included to the game. So, if you're not familiar, IT, Sand Devil, and lastly, Shoguns actually got nerfed to a point where it made the mechanics a little bit more easier for players to get involved in. Now, I was able to complete this dungeon way before that, and I know it's a little bit of a flex, but that's not my intention here. And I did have a video that incorporated using an all-rares team. If you guys aren't familiar with it, it was incorporating the Gnarl Horn, the Paragon, Reliquary Tinder, and 2 Cold Hearts with high blessings. It was very blessing demanding to be able to beat the boss. And there's a speed tune in mind and all that. But with this recent nerf, it's gotten so much more easier now to a point where I can just throw my nuts at it. And here's the kicker. Technically, people didn't want to realistically use G-Nuts against Phantom Shogun because it's negative affinity. So weak hits in this fight can cause problems for you being able to max out his shade counter, which means that his counter makes him impervious to certain things like damage after a certain point in time. And because he's negative affinity, he has a chance to weak hit, which means that you get even more in addition to that, and that just destroys the comp, right? Well, because of the nerf to the composition, or to the boss, these kind of compositions became a lot more possible. And it got to a point so much so that I was like, you know what? Let me try throwing enemy max HP champions like G-Nut against the boss and see if maybe we can speed up a run. And lo and behold, you see what we see here for our best time, 17 seconds to clear this. It became very possible. Now, I know, disclaimer, we've been showing our nuts quite a bit along this entire tour, and I do have something I want to say about the aspect of why I've been just using something in that's very comparable across all the different teams. I'll explain why we're kind of doing it that way, and I'll simplify the necessity of maybe trying to do this for your account down the road. But I am going to show you guys a little bit of the preset up here. We do have Yumiko for the reset. That's her main focus, her main goal. She is the fastest of this comp, so we do have her do a throwaway turn with throwing out the A2. And then, of course, we have someone like Lydia who does decreased defense and weaken, which is the more important part for being able to make sure we hit that 10% cap for the G-Nuts, as well as the 10% cap for Cold Heart, who's also in play here. This is the same Cold Heart that I use in the rare team demonstration. She's the faster of the two. She's the one that had the higher blessing. She is at 248 speed with the highest crit damage in this team, so 350 if you can see that. I believe she is the highest overall. She is. With the G-Nuts falling behind at a 334, and then, of course, 309, respectively. These are also the same G-Nuts you've seen in previous videos, 255 base speed, 254 shortly afterwards. And, of course, the same Lydia and the same Yumiko as you've seen before. The Cold Heart being the only variance here. She's only set up for 70% because she gets the 30% crit rate from the Heartseeker, which is what we care about for this build. And then, of course, she goes at a 248 speed. So, how is it going to go? It's going to go Yumiko do a throwaway turn, and then Lydia, and then the rest of the team is going to follow suit. It's going to be G-Nut, G-Nut, and then in Cold Heart, we get the reset, rinse, repeat. Now, here's the kicker. Cold Heart is with the highest crit damage, so she's going to initially start off with the Enfeeblement. So she's kind of like our pseudo enfeeblement champ. She's not really required for this comp, but it's a nice little way to kind of make sure that the G-Nuts aren't under enfeeble so that they can have a higher likelihood of landing that 30% enemy max HP. They're more viable because they have more output that they do with their ability compared to like Cold Heart. So I have her set up as my enfeeblement tank, quote unquote. And then, of course, the rest of them are going to go as possible. So I'm going to narrate this as we go along. This team is actually really, really fast, so we're going to have to show a couple times here to kind of express some of the things here. But the way it's going to go is I believe the boss is faster outside of everyone here. But we have Yumiko do the throwaway turn, the setup with Lydia, and then, of course, it's enemy max HP time. We had 2 weak hits there, or 1 weak hit there maybe in the play. But then we had our 60%. Even with... And I'm going to stop it right here. Even with having Enfeeblement in play, we still got the necessary damage that we wanted from Cold Heart, which is nice. That's how much the nerf to this boss has been introduced to the game. Also, considering we had weak hits, the shade counter has been brutally destroyed to a point where it does like a third comparatively to the amount of Shea counter stacks it would get if you had a weak hit. If a G-Nut did a weak hit like that, that would have been grounds for an immediate failure of the comp. But because they nerfed the Shea counter so much to a point where it's so low, we can play with those weak hits being not that much of a burden for our comp. Now, where we are at in this fight, we've had our full rotation of our entire team here at this point. And the boss is already down to his last 30%. So long as this team doesn't literally weak hit all across the board, there's no way that this team is going to fail. Now, keep in mind, everyone here now has Enfeeblement. So we're also going to be playing through Enfeeble as a debuff, which has a chance to increases the likelihood of a weak hit. But watch how the damage is applied. This is also kind of an address to the amount of defense and HP stats that have been reduced for the boss. The last G-Nut did the job and cleaned it up, and we cleared the run. So, in essence, a quick run that can be established because of the fact that this nerf was so heavy-handed. It allowed us to not only be able to tank the boss because the damage output is reduced. Now, Coldheart was pretty close to dying. You can see her, right? Pretty much like right there. It's really, really close to dying, but she still lives, and she's not really that tanky comparatively to other champions. Now, she did die there, and that does happen from time to time. And no, she does get crit, and she does get one shot by the boss initially, but because the stats are so easy to hit there, with the reset, I'm able to just rinse and repeat using the G-Nuts twice. So 60-60 gives me that 120. Literally allowing me to be able to get this this speed run kind of in play. And I find that to be kind of a good thing and a bad thing depending on how you want to go there. I'll show you once again some of the team members here. So the main one that changes from all the other teams that we used before is pretty much just the Coldheart. If you want to see my Lydia, my Yumiko, and my G-Nuts in action and in the stats that are involved around him, take a look at some of our previous videos of the Tour de SoulSaint Dungeon Edition, and you can kind of see it there. But I will say this. Coldheart, she's built in some damage. It's pretty much her main focus. Now, we did have her scale because there was a certain amount of HP you wanted to avoid getting, like, trickle damage going on to you. And that did have a place where, like, a certain amount of HP and a certain amount of defense was required. So that is laced in there, but she is at 42,000 HP, 42.7, rounded up to 43 if you want. 2K defense, and then, of course, 248 speed, which was a part of that previous speed tune. Now, at this point, you really kind of don't need her to be that fast if you don't want her to. But you do want her to get a turn before the boss does get his turn because you're trying to get that an extra 10%, right? Crit cap only at 70% to allow for the 30% to kick in with Heartseeker, and then of course as much crit damage as possible. Having her the highest also means your G-Nuts are safe, so you can scale this based off of your G-Nuts. You can try to push her higher, or you could set her to be the thing that sets the tone for your team, and then you could scale the G-Nuts under her if possible so that they don't take the enfeeblement hit right off the rip. Her blessing actually originally, and I have never changed it up until today, was set for Spider many moons ago, so I wanted her to get as much damage as she could. So Spider had like a lot of 10 extra adds, so it allows me to get more damage at that point. But you could literally put whatever you want in there. Crushing Ren's fine. You could do Phantom Touch if you care about it. Anything that gives you extra damage output is not bad for a blessing. Masteries wise is very comparable to what you would normally see on a build. She does have some accuracy checks because before in the past, this is very similar to like some of my earlier Coldheart builds for previous dungeons. It was kind of like, all right, I want accuracy. I want her to live as we're killing some of the spiderlings. I wanted her to have some extra accuracy. I wanted to have Lore Steel to give extra bonuses from the set bonuses. Maybe reset into her Heartseeker a little bit more with Cycle. And then, of course, you know, crit rate, crit damage, and then we end off with War Master, right? She's not in an ignore percent set, but I mean, you could technically go down the route of Helm Smasher or maybe even Flawless Execution if you cared about it. I didn't have that issue to hit kind of some high damage stats in terms of like crit damage, so I just went down that route. But your performance will vary, obviously. As long as you hit that cap, that's what you're mainly aiming for at the end of the day. And that's kind of how it works for us for the most part. Now, I wanted to take this opportunity to use this video, since we're kind of at the tail end of this, to kind of showcase, yes, I'm using my nuts almost practically everywhere. That is a byproduct of this game making a lot of dungeons easier to accomplish, like IT, Sand Devil, and most notably Phantom Shoguns recently, as you can see. Pros and cons. If you don't have these champions, obviously it's going to be harder for you to do. There are alternative options, and I try to introduce that depending on the dungeon to kind of give you guys a little bit of perspective towards it. But here's the pros and cons of this. The cons, and this is maybe not even it's not a non-issue, is they have made this content easier. Some things that people like in terms of their gaming experience, what they like is the challenge. And yes, there's other things in this game that propose and maybe facilitates that challenge. But for those that are PvE-centric players, some of the things that they enjoyed was the aspect of being challenged to fight this kind of content. So maybe newer players, if they're also of that same mindset, could be a little bit of like a disappointment, because outside of maybe having, some stat checks in terms of blessing count or whatever, this has now become a much more easier champion, or a much more easier boss to complete, along with all the other ones that got nerfed. That's one of the complaints you kind of have seen. But I would flip it from my perspective, is that, one, for the most part, all the dungeons and how they've been organized have not compromised any of my builds in terms of like the boss mechanics or the nerfs that they've introduced to these bosses. Hasn't really nerfed any of my comps that I've introduced to players in takeovers or that I've created for myself. So there's no loss there for me. In addition to that, they've made it even easier, so my quality of life aspect is I don't need to go any further in building my champions up to accomplish the goals that I need, which means that my resources that would have gone towards those champions now can be used for more competitive areas. Think Hydra or maybe PvP for that matter, right? So that's a pro for me. But also, here's the thing where like having this ability to be able to use these similar champions and similar builds across the board is that depending on where you're at in the game and depending on how you approach this game, whether you're a spender or free-to-play person, having the accessibility to have one champion do all was kind of a nice little bit of a W there. And the reason why I say that is that, like, your acquisition of gear can have challenges. Not everybody's going to be able to get a triple roll speed helmet in Savage, or an ideal piece that has like speed, defense, and crit rate for my defensive nukers and whatnot. So by having a one-size-fits-all team or set of champions that can be laced throughout my dungeon teams, makes it so that the builds and the resources, gear being the kind of conversation, a lot more expansive instead of being strained. I used to be the proponent of like, and it kind of comes full circle, which is the funny irony about the way the game has gone, and is that when you're first starting off in the game, you're starting with whatever you have, right? So it's a one-size-fits-all. That core 5 that maybe you're building up for clan boss translates to dragon, and you work with what you got and using them across all the other dungeons, and then lo and behold, your champion pool starts to expand, and now you can start specializing. Maybe you got that allure early on for Fire Knight, and instead of using Taragi or whoever else you had, now you can put her in instead, and now your team's more effective, right? And you would do that as your champion pool expands, and you would diversify your teams, and you would expand upon them, and you would build into that. It's kind of ironic now that depending on your champion pool, obviously being a focused conversation here, you're able to kind of go from that expansive and you're building multiple champions to now you're kind of going back to building a one-size-fits-all for all of your content. And then what that nets you is now champions you do want to build for specific content, PvP and Hydra being kind of the ones I can think of right off the rip. Now you have a lot more healthier of a gear pool to pull from to build more optimal builds because they're not so stressed across the board in other areas of the game. So that's a kind of a big pro. I think that kind of comes to the game. I will say it's important to kind of have a healthy balance of challenge that isn't insurmountable. And I do think that like a lot of content areas like Iron's Twins and maybe even Sand Devils and Phantom Shoguns were very strict. In order to prog into Sand Devil at that like early point in time, you needed an Eerie and then a complementary burner or something along those lines to be able to do the climb, let alone the farm, or your block damage, your unkillable Emic team comps to allow you to do Iron Twins effectively. And then of course, for Shoguns, this one's a little bit more open-ended because it was just basically blessing dependent overall. But there are some nuance in terms of like you needed a cleanser, you needed this, you needed that. And then, that can be restricted to the overall player's experience. And I think that what's necessary that Playum did a little bit of a nerf in the direction of those dungeons. Now, I do think that maybe, just maybe, the nerfs are a little too heavy-handed to a point where it becomes like it's such a blowover in terms of like how easy it is to beat these dungeons now that could be a little disheartening in terms of those that aspire to achieve greatness by conquering challenges. It's no longer a challenge, so it kind of sucks a little bit. But I think overall it was necessary for the game. But I do think that it is kind of one of those things that like don't be too heavy-handed maybe next time, player. That'd be my only conversation. Make it just a little bit challenging so people can enjoy the shock and awe of trying to be able to beat something that they've never beaten before. But also don't make it too hard to a point where like people can't access it. I think this game prides itself on diversity, and that's kind of something that I will champion to the day I die when it comes to this game, is that you have an expansive roster. Make it so that various champions are viable instead of just one. Yeah, we use G-Nut for almost everything now, but it's not the end all be all. You can use other champions, obviously. anyways, let me know what you guys think. Did you guys enjoy the Tour de SoulSaint? I feel like it's pretty self-explanatory that my current existence in this game has been so beneficial in terms of like my growth. Big salutes to the Ascended, my clan, as well as everybody in my community, the Ascended, you guys that are watching it right now. They kind of helped me along the way to be able to accomplish acquiring some champions, as well as, you know, we've all brainstormed various different ideas and various different approaches to be able to have an optimistic or optimized approach at dungeon farming, and we've accomplished that. And I feel like that's something that I couldn't say I did on my own. We've had help, and I think that I show my appreciation by saying thank you guys that are all here and supporting me. If you are still one of those type of players that are still aspiring to accomplish this, never be disheartened. And my only tip that I'll say to anybody that's watching this is that, yes, I'm using specific key champions, but they're not the end-all be-all. I think this game is, like I said, it prides itself on diversity. Look for the concept, not the champion. There are various different champions that can do similar roles in the game to accomplish the same end result. And always look to understand the why, the concept of the why of how a team operates, or the how, so that your why can be accomplished, you know? I'm using Husk because he's an enemy HP hitter. I'm using a Gina because he's an enemy HP hitter, you know? Like, it's the same concept. The why is just, you know, accomplished because of how these champions operate. So anyways, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you guys did you guys have any particular dungeon that you guys liked watching the most? I'm actually very curious. What's your favorite dungeon? How about that? Hit me with that. And let me know what you guys think. And if there's any other things you guys would like to see in terms of our accounts progression or where we're currently at in the game, I'm all ears to maybe showcase one or two things. You know, there are some things we still keep in lock and key, but as always, you know, I'm open to some requests. And as always, if you guys want assistance on your help, we do offer a takeover service. You guys can request that in a form that we have filled out or set up for you guys to fill out. That tells you some of the requirements we're looking for, some disclaimers, as well as, you know, some additional information in terms of like how we can help you grow your account. It's also going to be in the description below for you guys to refer to. So with that being said, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe once again, and always remember, stay ascended.
Together, you